Andrew Sjoquist, welcome to The Mentor, mate.
Thanks, Mark.
Founder and CEO of WinDC. Usually when it's got DC after the name, it stands for data centers for anyone who needs to know. Is that right?
You got it.
And Win, I presume, is that's just something you want to achieve.
We do, yeah. But it also comes off the back of wind turbines.
Wind.
Yeah.
WIND. I didn't get it. Sorry about that. So it's no double D, one D. Wind DC. Big topic, like it's a huge topic around the world. Obviously AI driven, much bigger topic today than it ever has been. The future of data centers, future of energy in Australia, future water. Water's important.
Yep. And
geopolitical issues are probably an issue, probably more so now than they were a week ago.
That's right.
Or 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
So maybe just quickly tell me a little bit about yourself and what WinDC does and where you guys are located.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Andrew Sjoquist, as we already established, but I founded a technology services company called ASC about 25 years ago. 15 years ago, we developed a specialty in renewable energy and critical infrastructure assets. And then over that period of time, we've now grown that to deliver services to about 20% of all renewable energy assets in Australia.
So what does that mean, services to renewable assets?
Yeah, so we provide the connectivity and cybersecurity services to keep those assets secure.
So give me an example of an asset. What an asset would be?
Yeah, an asset would be like a wind farm or a solar farm or a battery.
Yep.
And so they're running 24 hours a day. They're critical components of the electricity system. And we have to make sure that they're connected so that they can be contacted and managed.
We're talking cables.
Cables, yeah,
right.
Fibre optic cables, and also cybersecurity services that go over the top of that to make sure that there's no bad actors or untoward activity happening against those assets.
Against the assets, you mean the bundle of cables themselves with some sort of conduit over that. That's actually delivering the power that's being generated. Is that what we're talking about? We're talking about the power that's being generated from this solar farm, for example?
So, solar farm, for example, has two key things. It's got a high voltage transmission cable. It's a big copper cable that runs out of there for the electrons to flow on.
Yep.
Second thing that it often has is a fibre optic cable for data signals to flow on.
Okay. So, in other words, to maybe move the solar panels around or to turn them on, turn them off, or
correct, dispatch the power.
It's basically instructions in and out.
Correct.
Yeah. So something might be no good, and that comes through the fibre optic cable goes back to the administration. Could be in Turkey for some reason, and they're going to be saying, "Oh shit, we're not receiving enough sunlight, or something's going wrong."
That's right. So generally that'll be managed by or accessed by AEMO or the owners of the asset. So AEMO is the Australian Energy Market Operator, and they're controlling which generators are generating power, who's using the power, just to keep the whole power grid stable.
So you've got two parts. You got what you guys are doing is you're looking at the cables that transmit, let's call it copper wiring, that transmits the power that's been generated, call it generated, through whatever the system is. And then there's the fibre optic cable, which I don't know whether it runs underneath it or above it or somehow close by. Maybe it can't be too close by, but because I presume it can't be because electromagnetic fields would interfere with the fibre optic cable.
No, you're okay because it's light. There's no copper in it.
Okay, no, I meant near the copper cable.
No, because it's light, so it doesn't have any electromagnetic interference.
Okay, right, that's okay. That's sending information in and out, or passing information in and out as to how the device works and the readouts and stuff like that.
Yep.
So that was what you were doing.
Yes.
So how's that fit into data centers then?
So we've been in that space for about 15 years.
Yep.
About 10 years ago, we were working with a customer who had a new wind farm, and they were trying to connect to the energy system, but there was some constraint in the energy system which would only allow them to connect at half the amount of energy output that they were hoping to connect at.
So it would only receive half the energy that they could generate.
That's right. And so at that point in time, we said to them, would it be interesting if we brought to you a large load? So
someone else has a demand for the extra energy you can't transmit?
That's it. And put that behind your meter, so inside of their perimeter fence, and then use the power directly, which means that we don't need to worry about the constraint.
Right. Well, there's no wastage.
No wastage.
Basic. So in other words, let's say they're generating 1,000. The current system that they were feeding into could only take 500 for whatever the reason is. There's 500 being wasted. as inefficient, I guess. And what you've done, you said is, okay, can we bring in something that requires 500 close by?
Exactly right.
So you decentralize data centers out of big data centers and you put it very close to the source.
That's right.
Of power.
Yeah. So the term that's being coined now is an edge data center.
Edge
data center.
So it's on the edge of the power.
That's it.
Of wherever the generation of that power is coming from. Okay, that's cool. So what you did, you facilitated this. Yep. Or did you build the data center?
So we basically modularized it and made it portable. So one of the things we wanted to do was challenge the somewhat of a misconception or the modus operandi of the industry, which was the very first thing you've got to do is buy a lot of land next to substations.
Build a concrete slab and then build a fixed building and all the normal
billions
stuff.
of dollars. And
very expensive.
Times. Yeah.
Very expensive.
And so the reality there was that we thought we could challenge that assumption and perhaps go with a model where you don't have to start with that approach. And so at the same time as we were operating in the data center space with ASC for 25 years, and we'd already been 15 years into it by that point, we then saw this constraint arise where the energy couldn't be used. We put those two things together in a bit of lateral thinking and said, well, maybe we could pair the two together. And so data centers at that point, they weren't as power hungry as they are now, but we're already seeing at that point in time the start of that constraint rising. So we knew that they were growing. We knew that data centers were becoming more hungry.
Could I just stop you there for a second, because that's an important point. When you say data centers weren't as power hungry or didn't have as great a demand for power, is the reason why they are now is because you've got more servers and or racks in the data center, or is it the racks and servers that you currently have in a normal data center are generating more heat?
That's right. So the density is increasing.
The density is increasing.
Yeah.
And is that because the servers are looking at a lot more data than they've ever had in the past?
Yeah, and they're doing different operations. So this is where the rise of like NVIDIA, so the microchips that they make are much more power hungry.
Right.
So they're designed to do bigger, more complex calculations that need more power. And so by putting more of them into a rack, you're increasing the density of the rack.
Yeah, and we just should explain what I mean by a rack and what you mean by a rack. So we're talking about the cage, the steel cage that fits the servers in each shelf, for example. Basically, and that's called a rack. And we should also say, look, I think this is important anyway. When we talk about the cloud, there's no such thing as a cloud. I mean, basically what it is, it's we used to have the servers in our office, maybe under the desk or in a comms room or something. They've all been moved, not all of them, but largely most people would now send their data to a cloud, which ends up in it doesn't go to a cloud, but ends up into a data center where there's commingling or there's someone has the whole joint, which is probably rare. But they have these racks, or your data would be sitting in your server in your rack, which might be next door to Telstra's one.
That's right.
For argument's sake.
Yep. Yeah. So giant hotel for computers.
Yeah.
Kind of the way we look at it.
And I think just to paint a picture too, I think it's important because most people probably never been inside a data center. Like the reason they're power hungry is because it's very hot in there. If you don't have massive air conditioning systems 24/7, and and lots of sensing systems to make sure that the air conditioning it's cool enough.
Yep.
And then of course you've got the power that's actually inside the servers and inside all lighting system. There's power everywhere. Everything is power hungry.
Yep. Exactly right. And so you end up with the NVIDIA chips as a good example. The chip the size of your palm would consume as much power as your house. So
wow. Because it's so much more powerful as a circuit.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Much more complex. And then, like you said, all the extra ancillary services that go with that to keep it cool, super important.
And the main reason for that is if it gets hot in there, it will corrupt the data.
That's right. It'll corrupt data, and then electrical systems don't work well under heat. You'll start to get things literally melting.
Yeah, things fail.
Yeah,
basically.
Fail. And that's only getting more dense. So we've gone from, say, 15 years ago, your average rack was about 2 to 3 kilowatts worth of power, which is
that's a small house.
Yeah, small house, maybe a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And then now we're seeing the reference architecture from NVIDIA is hitting 150 kilowatts
per rack.
Whoa. And then the next generation that's coming in, say, a year to 2 years' time, is 600 kilowatts per rack. And then there is a line of sight to 1,000 kilowatts, a megawatt per rack.
And you may give us a bit of a sense, because I've been in these, but it's given me a bit of a sense as to how many racks might be sitting in a big data center, like an AWS one up in Queensland or wherever.
Yeah. So It's interesting. The number of racks is actually decreasing to some degree because the density is increasing.
Right.
And so some of the more traditional ones you'll see around, they're probably up to 20,000 racks.
Yeah, so we're talking about a football field plus.
Multiples. Some of the bigger ones in Western Sydney plan to 52 football fields.
Yeah, they're huge.
Huge. And so that's changing. The footprint's getting smaller, which then obviously helped us because we're making things more modular and portable. It means that we can actually get more capacity into a smaller footprint, which made the modular possibility a reality.
Do you mind just touching on water, the importance of water?
Yeah.
We're talking aircon systems, so that requires water.
Yeah, water's huge. So we at WinDC have a waterless system. So we're closed loop.
A waterless
system. So we don't hook up to water.
How do you solve the aircon issue then?
Yeah, so basically we use a closed loop liquid cooling solution, pretty much the same as the radiator in your car.
Right.
So there's actually a pipe that runs across the chip, takes the heat into the liquid, puts it out into a radiator outside, and just circulates that.
Right. Okay. Because in other words, it's everything's recirculated.
Recirculated,
basically. Okay. Now I get it. So just for those people listening to this, just to consider, having something 50 football fields big, sitting on concrete slabs with massive walls and massive ceilings. One of the things that's pretty obvious, and I know NextDC did this down in Melbourne years ago, but is solar panels on top of the roof. Because you got, or at least on the northeast side of the roof. Has that been able to solve any of the problems?
Been able to solve a little bit of the problem.
Yeah.
The problem with solar panels in the small amount of space that's there, it'll give you maybe a few hundred kilowatts, maybe a few megawatts.
Right.
But in the scheme of things, it's just clipping around the edges, basically.
Right. So therefore, you're saying it's important to get a source of reliable energy. And you've now worked out how to, maybe you can explain how these modular, are they on wheels? Modular systems?
They're literally like the shape of a shipping container. So we lift them onto the back of a truck, which is the wheels, and then we take them where they need to go, and we take them off, and they sit on the...
You sit on a plinth or something. Yeah. You put them on a platform.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, keep them off the ground, keep the dirt and the dust out. But yeah, they don't have wheels permanently.
How are you going to engineer this? The process of that, thought process?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there's a little bit of sort of lateral thinking here. I'm a big fan of Edward de Bono's works.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've read over the years just various tidbits from him. And so when you think about the problem that's there, writing that problem down and then...
So this is your process?
So this is the process, yeah. Yep. So writing that problem down to think through the process and get it into the mind, into the cognition system.
Yeah.
And so...
And you maybe you could explain what de Bono means, but the power of writing things down. Like, do you remember the why he says that's so powerful?
No.
Well, it's because it's the learning process, the cognition process of learning, the brain's cognition process of learning is most efficient and effective when three things happen. One, it doesn't mean this is not the only way you do it, but this is the optimal way to learn about something. One, hear it or see it. In other words, you hear the problem or see the problem. Two, you then make with your hand, not type it, not put it in your phone or your laptop or whatever it is, but actually write it out in writing up on a whiteboard like you have.
Right.
Then third, this is probably the most important part, the part that people forget about, is you prosecute it, you teach it. So you talk about it. So you go, here's the problem, you hear the problem, you talk to people about the problem, you write up on your whiteboard and you have your team, then you start to teach it and you prosecute it over a period of time, which means you refine the issue and the solution yourself.
Yep. 10 years for us. Yep.
10 years.
Yep.
But that's really powerful.
Yeah. And also so you can identify the components as well.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is about reversing some of the simple assumptions.
Well, because your brain, you think you got it in your head, but until you have to reduce it to writing, you don't have it in, you go, oh shit, hang on, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt, but I think that's a really important thing. I just wanted to, especially when you said de Bono, because I just wanted to clear that up for the audience anyway. So you wrote it down, you talked to your team about it?
Talk to the team about it, talk to other people about it. So in the industry, we come across a lot of different opinions, and particularly energy. It's one that's been a little bit divided over recent years. And so just difference of opinion. And if we could reconcile down the problem which we did, and then really understand everyone's viewpoint, it kind of guided us to connecting some dots. And so the dots were, on the one hand, we had an energy system that was starting to show constraint. On the other hand, we had a data center industry that was growing. And so
you match
them together.
It's very interesting because one of the constraints that people have been talking about in relation to it's called green energy or distributed energy is the problem of getting it back to where we need it because the cost of transmission.
Yep.
That's one of the issues. And of course, probably you've just highlighted something really important. It's not just building the transmission lines, but it's also there will be nodes where you can't take the amount of stuff that you're trying to send into it.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's some like an inbuilt inefficiency or an embedded inefficiency, and therefore bringing the demand for the energy to that spot actually is very efficient because you're cutting out a whole lot of transmission costs, which is copper and is expensive and it takes time and
planning approvals
or issues you got to go through someone's farm or whatever the case may be. And that makes a lot of sense. So I'd love to know a little bit more about the construction of this. Like you said, I think you said shipping container or something like a shipping container, or is it a shipping container?
It's not a shipping container, but it's taken the form of a shipping container.
Yeah.
So the reason for that, we work with a partner to help us construct and design these, who during that process, we had an oversized unit. So there's modular data centers that have been around for a while, but one of the challenges with them is generally you'd move them once and then you wouldn't move them again. So think of a portable house. You might split the house in half.
You're not moving it every month.
Move it every month.
Right?
No. And these have been used in mining and other industries. We wanted to get it into a shipping container format, so that ISO container format, which was developed in the 50s for global shipping, so that we could move them around. And that meant that these assets wouldn't potentially become white elephants, because if the opportunity or the advantage disappeared, we'll just come along with a truck and pick them up and move them to where the problem exists somewhere else.
So you just get a forklift, put them on a truck, and weight constraints?
They're about 25 tons.
Right, 25. That's fine enough. And then how many racks would you be able to get into one of these?
So we've got a first generation unit that's arrived in Australia in the last month.
Yep.
That only fits 5 racks. But they're moderate density racks. These racks will do 20 kilowatts per rack. So each unit's about 100 kilowatts. We have other units that are on the way that we're manufacturing, which are 2 megawatt unit across about 12 racks. So that's to meet a reference architecture from NVIDIA.
Just to give us some context, so 20 kilowatts relative to 2 megawatts, what are we looking at?
100 times.
100 times, okay. So that's important.
And so 20 kilowatts per rack.
Per rack.
And so all up, it's 100 kilowatts.
Right.
So it's 20 times 100 is your 2 megawatts.
Yeah. Are they able to be connected? Like, so you can just put another lot, just keep building them up?
That's it. Stack them together. Just fill
on top of each other, or are they
next to each other is better.
Yeah, but you've probably got space anyway. It's not like you're in the middle of the city or something.
Nah.
Yes, you got space. And what sort of fabrication are we talking about here?
So they're fabricated like a shipping container, but on the
steel.
Yeah. But on the inside, you've got a sleeve, so there's a whole lot of shock absorption in the walls.
Yeah, because there is movement, slight movement in the racks.
Movement to the racks, but also when we can transport them full as well. So we want to pre-stage them like in the city.
Oh, right. Okay. They're already packed up.
Yep.
Ready to go.
Yep. Just literally take them off the truck, plug them into the power, and off they go. So inside, it's fully self-contained. So you've got redundant chillers, air conditioning units. You've got UPSs for power backup. You've got the racks themselves, of course, and then all your other building systems, like your building management systems, fire systems.
What about let's call it management systems? I mean, do you have to get into the fiber optic cable? It's like, because like if you want to watch your racks, like let's say I'm in one of these distributed systems, and is it a Wagga or something like that, near a wind farm or something, but I'm in Sydney and I want to monitor the security in my rack, cameras, because like these things have cameras everywhere.
Yep.
Making sure that the bloke next door isn't Julian Assange trying to log into my rack, that's how it happened.
Yep.
That's exactly what happened, by the way.
Yep.
He got into some racks which weren't being properly monitored, and well, not him, but like his team did. And I want to look at that on my my laptop, whatever it is. How's that work? How's the cabling? Do you log it? Somehow do I use the fiber optic cables that's at that center?
Yeah. So it's an objection too that we get around. Oh, well, there won't be the connectivity available at these.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about.
And so it's not just the monitoring connectivity; it's also how do you actually move the data, the big data, in and out of these environments. Yeah. Our answer to that is the fiber optic cables, and we've got plenty of them in Australia. We've got plenty of good fiber systems, both terrestrially.
Do they naturally go into the wind farm, for example, or
some of them do have it, which is part of the energy system. Right. So they have what's called an OPGW fiber cable that goes on those big high voltage transmission wires. Yep. You see them down the side of the road. The very two top ones are actually fiber cables.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And so there's that from the energy transmission guys, and then you've also got in-ground, which is your Telstras, your Vocuses. Right. And then more recently, you've got companies like Subco, which is Bevan Slattery's company, you know Bevan, who has put the submarine cable systems in the ocean. Yeah, so they go Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide.
Did you end up completing that?
I think it's just come ashore in Adelaide. It's almost finished.
It's from Singapore or something. It's coming from.
Went to Oman. There's an Oman system.
Whoa.
Yeah. That's been live for about 2 years.
Wow.
And then he's always got.
It was a massive project.
Yeah, something coming along.
Way ahead of himself. So we should get him on the show actually, but he'd be good. I haven't seen him for a couple of years. But so like just so you can pretty much, I think what you're saying is that everything that you can do inside a data center that's, I don't know, in Brisbane or something, or out west here in Sydney, you can do in one of these distributed data centers in the modular system, sort of sitting up on a plinth somewhere next door to a wind farm or a solar farm or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. And look, the reason why the data centers are in the metro areas, this is a bit of a historical thing, where as energy started to become constrained, as people started moving their computer rooms out of their offices into these data centers, the first thing was the enterprise wanted to be able to see it and touch it. Yeah. Just across town.
Yeah, you just want to go and see it.
And then, or hug it,
maintenance is an issue too. Like shit happens on a server and you get a notification. You've got to be able to go out and get a mechanic out there to fix it.
To touch it, yeah. And then you have probably late teens, you had the rise of the cloud. And everyone started moving their workloads from these type of facilities into the cloud. Now, they were still in one of these
data
facilities,
center.
The cloud. It's probably just the next rack or down the road. But then everyone started realizing, well, actually, I don't care where this infrastructure lives or where it comes from.
It could be anywhere in the world.
That's it. So as long as it meets within certain criteria, it's okay. And so that also helped our thinking to say, well, if it's in Sydney or if it's in Dubbo, provided I can connect to it, who cares?
And I can see it. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
That's it.
And as long as you have some sort of service, so do you guys provide the maintenance services and all that stuff?
Correct, yeah. So we have smart hands that can do
I can ring you up and say, listen, mate, like there's something at work or I need to replace a server or something like that. And I access it through the services agreement.
That's right. Yeah, we can do that for you.
Can you talk about, so recently, of course, one of the big places these have been getting set up, which has always sort of surprised me in terms of water, but I guess you sort of answered the question, but is in some of these UAE countries. And of course, like if I'm Iran, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. And I would, because I'll be sending a drone in and that's what's happening. Yeah. Because, for a whole lot of reasons, but all of a sudden remote data center locations geographically starting to look a bit better. Mm. Yep. And Australia is about as remote as you're going to get. Maybe New Zealand's a bit more remote, but Australia all of a sudden has an advantage.
That's right.
A massive geopolitical advantage.
Indeed. And geopolitical and energy advantage. So this energy problem that we're seeing.
Alternative energy advantage.
Yeah. So if you look at the size of the energy problem at the moment, the biggest constraint is the grid. So how to get it from A to B, from generation to consumption. Yeah. If you actually look at how much energy is being generated and wasted, it's over 7.2 terawatt hours every year.
Give me a sense of how much that is.
That is all of the data centers in Australia doubled each year consumption.
Right.
So add all the data centers together and double their consumption, and that's how much power is wasted.
Wow.
Yeah. It's 2 million houses.
And that's not wasted through coal-fired power stations. That you're talking about.
It's generated and it can't go anywhere. It's got nowhere to go.
But it's not generated out of a coal-fired power station. It's generated out of some other alternative system.
This is just renewable energy.
Just renewable energy. Yeah. So it's coming from a wind farm or a solar farm or something like that.
Yeah.
And is that because the grid and or the connections of the grid can't take the amount of stuff
That's right. There's a couple of reasons. The connections of the grid, the capacity, but then also the demand. So if you look at what's happened with solar panels on residential rooftops, that's now one of the biggest generators of electricity in the country, people's houses. That used to be the demand in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
So now they don't have a demand. You've still got the supply happening. You've got a glut of capacity. And that's what we're targeting.
Which is why people have, again, decentralized. They put batteries in their own home and might as well collect it.
Correct.
And use it later.
Yeah. But the challenge with the batteries may well be in the future that that'll kind of flatten out the volatility. But the challenge will be that the utility scale batteries rely upon the volatility to meet their forecasting models.
Right.
And so the volatility disappears because more people have batteries. You may well end up back in the same situation.
So you solve the water. Sounds like you solve the water piece pretty easily. So what are the constraints about where you can and can't go then?
For us, it's really about the connectivity is the key one, making sure that we can get access to or remotely to these locations. So we want some diversity in the approach.
How do you mean access? What do you mean?
Fiber connectivity access.
Right.
So we want to have two different paths.
Connectivity, you mean connectivity back to the client or back to the grid?
Back to the internet.
Back to the system.
Yeah, back to the system.
Yeah.
So we want to be able to connect via the fiber optic cables
that already exist
in different directions so that we have diversity in case one of them gets broken.
So that means, maybe you could help me out here, but for every 10 sources of generated power, there might be 5 who don't have that connectivity.
Correct. But we can also dig that connectivity in. So to give you some sort of scale on the cost of doing that compared to transmission. So your transmission cables to build more high voltage cable systems is about 100 times the cost of building the fiber optic cable system.
Right. Why don't they just lay the fiber optic when they're laying the copper? I mean, why don't they do it at the same time?
They do now.
They do now?
They do now.
And what was the reason they didn't do it before?
Because what's happened in the grid over the last 25 years is that if you think back to like 2000, there was only about a dozen coal generators in the country. So you didn't have these problems because you didn't really need to communicate to them. You still need to connect to substations to some degree. But now what's happened with renewables, you've distributed the generation. You've got over 1,000 locations where power's generated. You have a communications coordination requirement, which you didn't really have before.
It's sort of like blockchain. It's a little bit like it sort of de-risks things a bit in that like, for example, if you've got 50 footy fields with a whole lot of data being stored in that particular and processed in that particular center, if I'm trying to de-risk, one of the risks could be that, something happens, terrorists or whatever comes in and someone tries to bomb it. One way of de-risking, a bit like the way you can de-risk your information, is to distribute it amongst lots of ledgers. So what you're doing is you're sort of distributing it into smaller pieces, not just as efficient, works the same. It doesn't really matter. Which means you've got, if you want to hurt me, you've got to get to all my locations, or I'm going to be able to preserve some of my data because it's less likely you can get to all of my locations as a risk.
As a risk, that's right.
It's not necessarily saying we're going to get attacked, or I'm not suggesting that, but it is, in terms of funding, which, you guys have to raise money and stuff like that. That's an important factor from investors' point of view.
Correct, absolutely. And
de-risking.
De-risking. And it's also about, it wouldn't necessarily be anything catastrophic as terrorists. We could be as simple as
fire,
power access.
Yeah.
What happens if you can't actually get the energy that you're planning to get?
Yeah.
Because the grid's not there.
Okay. So what happens if there's no wind? What's your redundancy?
Yeah, good question. So,
or no, I don't know, not enough sun or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So those wind and solar generators, they work on what's called a capacity factor. And so your solar assets work at about a 25% capacity factor, which means they generate 25% of the time. Your wind assets are about...
That you make that assumption. There's an assumption in that regard. You make the assumption that for 25% of the time, it's going to be collecting
Oh, no, that's actual data.
That's actual.
Data.
That's
Yeah,
actual.
That's actual.
So 75% of the time,
the sun's down over.
It's raining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then wind's about 40%. It varies site to site because of how close you are to the equator, how windy it is, all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But we work on those sort of between 25 and 40%. Now, everyone says, oh, but data centers have to have 100% uptime and availability. And that is true, but data centers don't need 100% of their power 100% of the time. They need some power 100% of the time, but not all of their power.
So can you store some, can you?
So it's either storing it in on-site batteries. There is an ability to draw back from the grid if we really need to. But then there's another approach that we're taking, which is to schedule the loads. So in Australia, there's been a lot of focus on generation. How do we build more generation? Rather than how do we better utilize the generation that we already have? And so there's the other side of the coin, which is called demand response. And so how do you manage the demand so that it's used at the best time of the day? For example...
So try to get it done while it is windy or it is sunny.
Yeah, that's right.
As opposed to nighttime.
Yeah, and when people don't need the power. So if you're in Metro Melbourne, between about 2 p.m. and 8 p.m., everyone's coming home, turn the heaters on, turn the air conditioners on. It's pretty congested on that grid. So if we look at the amount of utilization that an AI factory, where these data centers are with huge demand for compute and the energy that they need, their utilization is only about 40 to 50% at best case. Now, if you can align that to the amount of time in the day where you don't have users needing the peak power, then you'll still get the same outcome at the end of the day, but you haven't had to try and run these things right during the peak period.
Yeah.
And so as a result, you can start to flatten out the volatility and the wastage because you're not having to keep building for these peak demands where you've stacked user demand or human demand with AI demand, and now you're building these extra large transmission networks and generation networks, which then outside of those periods have a massive lull and aren't getting any revenue return on them. So there's an exercise here that we're working on. How do we flatten out the demand? And AI workloads are actually quite good at that. I
was going to say, are you using AI models to work out the answers to these things?
Correct.
So you're actually loading up your own data center. Wherever you keep your data is getting loaded up with the good. That's why NVIDIA is so important. But you are using AI to do the calcs. You're building your own AI agent to do this stuff.
We're looking at all the data that's coming in from AEMO. So every 5 minutes on the grid, every generator reports a variety of different metrics. Same with the off-takers, people are taking power off. And it's about understanding how those trends work, forecasting the demand. That's what AEMO does. And so, but what's happened because of the change over the last 10 years with the mix of the actual generation, that's become more volatile. And you end up in what's called a duck curve. Look it up. It's basically looks like a duck when you draw it on a graph. And so you get this problem where in reality, over the last 10 years, we haven't actually consumed any more power as a whole because you've had all this load taken off with household solar, but the volatility is doubled.
Right. At a particular time, the amount of load demand is double.
At the peak.
At the peak, I'm talking about. At a particular time, at the peak time.
Yeah, to what it was, but over the course.
Is that because of our behaviour that we tend to do things at a certain time of day?
But also because you've got more renewables in the grid.
Right.
Because it's over generating during the day when the sun's up, and then at night your demand is still there, but the generation's not necessarily there because it hasn't been firmed or the sun's gone down or whatever it might be.
So what stage are you guys at now in terms of rollout? Yeah,
so we're rolling out the first site. We've got a launch next week, and the first site will roll out in April.
Can you say where it is?
It's in New South Wales.
Yep.
And it'll
be like regional?
Regional, on a solar site.
Yep.
And this is the interesting thing about the economics here too, is that they're welcoming us with open arms because they
can make more money.
Well, they can make more money, and at the moment they're getting curtailed. So their assets out there, it's deployed, can't generate the revenues that they modelled 10 years ago when they thought up the idea. And so they're looking for new revenue streams. So they'll actually say, please come here and consume our power.
And how do you go negotiating with it? Is it like a set? I mean, when you're going to go and put your containers there and, with all your racks in there, and you're going to be, drawing some of their unused power, call it. How do you negotiate a price?
Yeah, it's a good question. So pricing, again, is set every 5 minutes on the market. Then you also have these side agreements called a PPA, power purchase agreement. So generally you'll get these data centers, most of them have them, where it's a private kind of arrangement on the side, doesn't impact market prices. So there's a balance there between a PPA.
It's undisclosed.
Undisclosed.
Yeah, that's why it doesn't impact, because
right.
You say it's a side agreement.
Side agreement.
Yeah.
Yep.
In other words, we'll work out the market. We'll work at the market rate.
Yep.
But we're going to have a side agreement as to actual rate we end up paying based on usage and availability and et cetera.
Exactly right. And this is how a lot of organisations are saying they're 100% green, because they buy enough power to cover their power usage. But the challenge with that is they buy enough power to cover the power usage in a 24-hour window, but it's not necessarily there at that point in time. And this is why we
always work ways around things.
It's a financial instrument, right?
Yeah. And how are you going with investors?
Yeah, investment's been positive.
So who are we talking about? So when you say, you don't need to give me names, of course, but are we looking at funds or private equity funds, or what are we looking at?
Yeah, so initially there's a small group of high net wealth that's involved in the first rounds, and then we're looking at combination of super funds and industry participants, mainly US based.
Not VCs though. You're not talking to venture capitalists.
Not at the moment. We are. There is some discussions with the venture capitalists. I think it's an interesting space, and I've certainly learned a lot in the last couple of months around where we're going this, and maybe you've got some tips for me. But
VCs are pretty tough.
Yeah, correct. But we're really seeing this as more of an industrial play.
Yeah,
so the reality is that this is long.
That's not their territory.
Yeah, it's a chain. It's a structural shift.
So how have you been finding your H&W, your high net wealth? Like, how are you finding? How have you been sort of targeting your high net wealths?
Yeah, so we've got some good networks, and we've got good equity advisors appointed who have the relationships with high net wealths, and then it's just relationships with people through those networks that we've managed to find some good cornerstone investors. Off the back of that, we've also got some good support from the CEFC. So
what's that?
The Clean Energy Finance Corporation. So this is Australian government's looking to participate in some way, but the fact that they're interested and
so gives everyone else comfort.
Yeah, that's right. That's
so maybe you could quickly just take, if you don't mind, if you just quickly take the audience anyway through from when you first conceived the idea, like the funding process. Did you get a safe note from someone, or how'd you find, how'd you roll this out? Because these things cost money. You got to get engineers. It's like design work. There's mechanical, industrial. Probably chemical engineers. I mean, you got just engineers coming out of everywhere, and they're not cheap. And then you got then you got to go and build your prototypes, and you got to test it, and blah blah blah. Then you got software engineers. Like I can't imagine the cost of this thing. Did you self-fund it? Did you sell your house? Did you find a family member, or how'd you kick it off, and what have been the various stages?
Yeah, look, self-funding was the initial part. We were fortunate that we'd built ASE to a point as a platform business that it could start to engage in innovative projects.
It was profitable enough to have spare cash.
Yeah, correct. And so the challenge, I think, in Australia particularly, is that a lot of people want to invest when there's a certain outcome.
Yeah, they're looking for dividends too in this country. Unfortunately, that's the way it works, because they've got choices.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of them.
That's right. And so we found as we sort of evolved that process, or through the process, we're needing to find offshore capital. We're trying as much as possible to keep it in Australia. I mean, I've got a view that Australia should punch above its weight. We should use the resources that we've got. But
no, don't start me on it. Yeah. If like innovation, is underdone in this country. Yeah, innovation funding, and investment underdone.
Yeah. So, as we move into the larger kind of capital requirements, which is where
what sort of
now.
tickets are you talking about?
Sorry,
what sort of ticket sizes are you talking about?
$100 million plus.
Yeah, so you're raising $100 million plus.
Yep. So, that has meant that we just got to think about this in an infrastructure play style.
Yeah.
So, and that has been a departure from a lot of Australian VCs. It's just the scale. So the scale with our US conversations is a little bit easier to swallow.
Yeah.
We've got some great partners that we're working with from a manufacturing perspective who've supported us along the way. Armada in particular has been a big supporter of ours.
What's Armada do?
They basically manufacture modular components.
Right.
Yeah. So they
do they design and construct, or you have to do the design?
They design and construct with our participation. So we've basically had a partnership to get the density increased and work with them on that. They've also done testing of the units in UAE.
So, is it DCNF funding as well, or for Armada, or is it it's just design and construct and you fund?
Design and construct and we fund, but they also have a global market as well. So they're into various areas. They've got test deployments in the UAE, which has been good for us because it matches kind of the outback conditions.
Yeah.
So, and then we'll scale up this location. So we're really looking at this as a structural change to the industry. So in terms of industrial revolutions, this is the fourth one. And so there really will be a seismic shift that's going to occur, we believe. And so we could probably talk all day about whether or not the AI story is going to continue to grow. But the reality is,
assume it does.
The demand's going to be there because we've got a 90-day deployment model. So we're able to order and get delivery in 90 days. We can actually sign the order with the end customer, effectively use debt instruments, and then bring the units onshore and deploy them in the time that it takes to ink the contract.
Final question for you, and it's an important question, I guess. These things, in order to get customers, you're going to have I hate to use the word, it's underdone, but let's call it BDM. Someone's got to go out and find people who want to put their racks there.
Yep.
Would you just go and try and find, have you been able to land an AWS or someone big like that? Or?
Yeah, so we've got a cornerstone customer, which is a multinational healthcare company. That'll be revealed pretty soon. Then we're also now chasing neoclouds and researchers. So neoclouds are like your Sharon AIs, your Firmuses, they're the Australian ones.
Yep.
Nebius is like a big US one. So they're focused just on GPU clouds, often for the hyperscalers. They, when they're looking at sites, are looking at minimum, say, 100 megawatt sites, which is a huge amount of power. And so we've had really good engagement with them. The ability to roll out quickly, which is the thing that is the struggle for Australia, is how do we participate at the global speed?
Because that's a big issue here. I don't know, whoever it is, one of the, your traditional data center groups, they've got to get we've got to buy the land. Let's say they've got to get the approval, then they've got to build it. And, it's 90-day deployment is never the case. It's like a couple of years.
Yeah.
And also they've got to fund it. A lot of times these are $1 billion plus type deals.
Correct.
Like billions of dollars. And the approval process is not simple.
No.
You're not out at Dubbo or something like that where no one really gives a damn. I mean, I'm sure the local farmers do, but generally speaking, you haven't got, it's not like being in the west of Sydney.
Yeah. It's hard. And then you've got also electrical system hookups and there's all these challenges. It really is testament to those who have done it.
Yeah.
The question now is where does it go next? Because I don't think you can you can't continue to expand necessarily in metro areas and still keep the community happy, power systems happy. The data center and energy systems really have to converge, and that has to happen from a government policy perspective. If we want to play in AI, we've got to think about how we're going to power it, and that's a whole other conversation. But at the same time too is how do we make these things basically integrate better into society and the community, and the large ones that exist in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane today, they've done a great job. They continue to do a great job. They're critical to delivering those services to the populations that are here. The question then is how do we scale fast enough to keep up with the global demand? And so our view is that it has to be done where the energy is generated. It can't be done in the cities.
It's interesting too, because I was just thinking as you're speaking then, this. The price of the value of real estate's gone up significantly, and it's nearly like it's in some respects, putting a big data center in somewhere in Sydney or Melbourne, Brisbane for that matter. It's nearly prohibitive because it's probably not the best use of real estate. Ultimately, particularly when we've got a housing crisis, you get a much better pound for pound, you get a much better outcome if you build apartments there. as opposed to if you're the landowner, as opposed to sort of building like an industrial estate there. I mean, sure, the data center might pay a good rent, but over time, that as the cities grow, so it makes more sense to sort of move further out.
Yeah, and it's going to happen ultimately. Look at the White Bay Power Station here in Sydney. We used to generate electricity literally in Darling Harbour.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened for 100 years.
No.
So,
well, they're pulling it down right now.
Yeah.
This disruption, I mean, I don't think it's probably a disruption as such, but it's probably more likely an addition to other styles of, how a data center will work relative to the power grid. It's going to be adjunctive.
Yep, 100%.
And it's going to help things grow and probably smooth out the growth.
That's the plan.
It's not designed to say from now on every data center is going to be like this.
No,
that's not your deal.
No, it can't be. I mean, we just need as a country to have the ability to participate in that global growth.
Yeah,
and this is just another way we can do it.
And is it, when you say global growth, are you suggesting that Australia is doing this? That in Australia we should be doing this to grow like the rest of the world, or are you saying that we perhaps should be looking at it to participate in the rest of the world's growth?
Participate because in the rest of the world's growth.
Right. So in other words, we're a place where they're going to store data.
We're a place where they're going to store data, but also we're a place which then can innovate off the back of that infrastructure. I see this as the next big export industry.
Wow.
Right. So cool. We over in the West Australia, we dig stuff out of the ground and we send it offshore, and then we often buy it back in refined products. There's an opportunity here for us to harness the energy resources. And if you think about the opportunity from, say, Perth is within 50 milliseconds of 500 million people in Asia.
Wow.
That's the opportunity.
That's assuming the speed of light.
Speed of light. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, very fast. And you're going to be using one of Bevan Slattery's cables.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's the only way you're going to get across unless you want to build down a sea cable yourself.
No.
Well done, Andrew. Well done. That's great. That's it's funny. Yesterday I was being interviewed and someone said to me, "Well, I was talking about the innovation, Australia as being an innovation nation and not innovating enough, and what can we take advantage of?" And I was only been thinking the last couple of days about the Middle East and the data centers there that getting potentially getting hit with drones and stuff. And I thought one thing is we're a big joint, Australia, but I do nothing about your business. But I often thought, I wonder how somehow we could have data centers scattered around the country. Well, you've solved it. You've solved the question.
There we go.
And that's what we need to do. That's how you become a nation building. Governments need to get behind this sort of stuff and support this sort of stuff. In fact, governments should be investing in this sort of stuff. They should be. They should be underpinning your 100 million round.
They've been very supportive. The CFC particularly.
Money.
There is some contribution. Even the fact that their involvement is helpful.
Yeah.
It gives other people comfort that there's support there from the Australian government. But yeah, like this has to be the way that Australia takes part in this global growth. Like there is room to use capital effectively here in Australia. We've been pretty good at attracting it, but my observation as an entrepreneur is that to get past that initial innovation sort of seed area, it's very, very hard. It's hard to do that. And this is why we've kind of taken more of an industrial approach.
Yeah, and taking it overseas.
And exporting.
Exporting.
Yeah, exporting. And so, using the Middle East as an example, the submarine cable system for Subco, there's one that lands straight into Oman.
Wow.
Right, so it's right in the middle of the Middle East. So there shouldn't really be a lot of reason why we couldn't perhaps relocate some of that during turmoils. But all this is just lateral thinking,
or even have redundancies
between
the two.
Yeah. There's a whole range of different use cases, but we're well placed as a country. We just got to make sure we harness the opportunity.
Andrew Sjoquist, thanks very much, mate. That was excellent.
Thanks, Mark.
Loved it.
Thanks for having me.